First, it was just the fire and the wind-familiar sounds in a mountain cabin built for solitude. Then came the scratch at the door. Mason ignored it. Trees creaked, snow shifted, but when the whimper came, low, broken, almost pleading, he stood up. What waited outside wasn't just a dog. It was the first crack in the wall he'd built around himself. And when a second dog appeared days later, the wall didn't just crack, it shattered. Before we begin this unforgettable story, would you mind sharing where you're from in the comments? And if stories of love, loyalty, and second chances move you, please give this video a like and consider subscribing. Willow Glen wasn't a town you found by accident. Tucked between the tree-lined ridges of Montana's Bitterroot Mountains, it was the kind of place where time walked slower. Winters here came like ancient spirits, bitter white and silent. That night, the snow was coming down in thick sheets, muffling the forest, erasing the roads, and bending the pines under its weight. The wind shrieked like something lost and angry, rattling the old cabin windows as if trying to claw its way inside. Mason Clark sat alone beside a dying fire, wrapped in a navy flannel and weathered jeans, his boots kicked off by the hearth. He was 47, broad-shouldered, with lines etched deep around his eyes, lines carved by grief more than time. His salt-and-pepper beard had grown untended over the past months, and his eyes, once a vibrant green, now bore the dull sheen of a man who'd stopped looking outward. Mason had been a high school literature teacher once beloved for his warmth and sarcasm, until tragedy hollowed him out. 3 years ago, a drunk driver ran a red light and took the life of his 12-year-old daughter, June. His marriage collapsed not long after, and Mason walked away from everything, retreating into the woods, into silence. Now the fire was his only companion. He'd just leaned back with a steaming mug of coffee when he heard it, soft at first, almost drowned beneath the howl of the storm. A scratching. Then again. And again. It was the kind of sound that made something old in your bones sit up and listen. He stiffened. Mice a branch. But then came the whine. A single heart-wrenching whimper. He stood setting the mug aside and reached for the flashlight on the mantel. The boards creaked underfoot as he crossed to the front door. His breath was shallow. Instinct told him it wasn't danger, but it was something. Carefully, he unlatched the deadbolt and cracked the door open. The wind screamed in, throwing a gust of snow into his face. He raised the light. There, on the wooden porch, lay a dog. A golden retriever, fully grown, its golden coat soaked and clumped with ice, the color muted by slush. The dog was curled in on itself, legs twitching, ribs faintly visible beneath wet fur. Its eyes, wide and dark, blinked up at him with desperation and surrender. Mason didn't hesitate. "Jesus," he muttered, opening the door wide and stepping out barefoot into the snow. The chill bit instantly, but he didn't care. He bent down and gently lifted the dog, whose body was frighteningly light and limp. It didn't struggle, didn't even whimper, just lay still against his chest, breath faint and irregular. Inside, he kicked the door shut and rushed to the hearth, laying the dog onto a thick plaid rug. "Hang on, buddy," he whispered. His hands trembled as he grabbed an old wool blanket from the couch and wrapped the animal tightly. Then he threw another 2 logs into the fire, sending sparks spiraling upward. The dog's fur was cold and rough, stiff with frost. Mason ran to the kitchen, filled a bowl with lukewarm water, and grabbed a towel. He knelt beside the retriever and began to rub its fur gently, whispering all the while, words he didn't realize he still knew how to say. "You're okay now. You made it. You're safe." After a few minutes, the dog's ear twitched. Mason paused. Its tail gave the faintest, slowest wag. "You're a fighter," Mason said softly. "I can see it in your eyes." The dog didn't have a collar, no name tag. But those eyes, they weren't wild. They were tired, aching, and above all trusting. Mason didn't know why that shook him more than anything else. Far away from the cabin, down in the snowy heart of Willow Glen, 10-year-old Lila Bennett sat at the edge of her twin bed, holding a crayon-drawn picture of her dog. Lila had pale blonde hair and a constellation of freckles across her cheeks. She was quiet, imaginative, and stubborn as an ox when she loved something. Her best friend, perhaps her only real friend, had always been her golden retriever, Sunny, a gentle soul with amber eyes and a tail that wagged in rhythm to her laughter. Sunny had gone missing 3 days ago during a walk when the leash clip snapped near the edge of the forest. Lila had run until her legs burned, screaming his name into the trees. No answer. No paw prints. Just snow. Now, every night she wrote him letters, tiny folded notes with hearts and stick figures and promises that she'd find him. She placed them under her pillow and prayed, though she wasn't sure to what or whom. Tonight's letter said only, "Please come home. Please come back to me. I miss you more than anything." Her mother, Angela Bennett, watched from the hallway. Angela was in her mid-30s, a nurse at Willow Glen Clinic with tired hazel eyes and soft curls always pulled back in a bun. Life had never been easy. Her husband left when Lila was still in diapers, but she had grit, and her daughter's joy was her anchor. Seeing it now dimmed by the loss of that golden dog made something twist in her chest. Back in the cabin, Mason continued rubbing the dog's fur, speaking in a voice that cracked now and then. The fire warmed the room, slowly casting orange light across the wooden walls. The dog, who he still hadn't named, began to breathe deeper, more stable. His eyes closed, but his body no longer trembled. Mason sat beside him, staring at the flames. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel quite so heavy. Morning in Willow Glen did not arrive with sunlight. It arrived with stillness. The blizzard had passed during the night, leaving behind a silent world wrapped in white. The trees stood motionless, their branches heavy with snow, and the mountains loomed like ancient sentinels beneath a pale sky. Inside the cabin, the air was warm, the fire now reduced to glowing embers, and the quiet was broken only by the soft, rhythmic breathing of the dog on the rug. Mason Clark had not slept. He had spent most of the night beside the golden retriever, ensuring the dog stayed warm, watching every flicker of movement with a kind of cautious hope. Now, as the morning pushed its gray fingers through the curtains, the dog began to stir. The retriever, whose coat had dried into loose golden waves, opened his eyes. Mason had pulled up an old beanbag chair and sat quietly with a notebook pretending to read, but mostly watching the dog breathe. When their eyes met again, there was recognition there, not of Mason, but of safety. The dog lifted his head slightly, ears twitching, and let out a soft huff. Mason set the notebook aside and leaned forward. "Welcome back," he said gently. The dog didn't wag his tail, but he didn't flinch either. Instead, he tried to sit up. Mason helped him, lifting under his front legs. The retriever trembled with effort, but stayed upright. That's when Mason noticed something he hadn't in the dark, several faint scars along the dog's left flank, like old burns or lacerations now healed into tight lines of pale skin beneath the fur. He frowned. "What happened to you?" he muttered. There was no collar, no tag, no microchip scar on the ear. But this wasn't a stray. Mason had seen too many animals in his life to miss the signs. The dog was house-trained, careful, and intelligent. His eyes didn't dart about like a wild animal's, they stayed steady, watchful. He refilled the bowl with fresh water, and the dog drank it slowly, then curled back up near the fire without a sound. Mason stood and stretched, glancing toward the front door. Something still gnawed at him, that sound last night, the way the dog had appeared so suddenly, and now the scars. He walked to the coat rack, grabbed his parka, and laced up his boots. Outside, the world looked like it had been dipped in sugar and frozen in time. Mason stepped off the porch boots, sinking into knee-deep snow, and scanned the immediate area. He circled around the cabin and saw them immediately prints. Not just one set. 2 sets of paw prints partially covered meandering from the tree line toward the cabin. But what made his breath hitch was the third trail, human footprints deeper and more deliberate, trailing alongside the dogs and then diverging toward the east. Mason crouched his hand brushing the edge of one print. Fresh, maybe less than 12 hours old. He stood following the trail for a few yards, but it vanished quickly into the drifts where the wind had blown the snow back across the ground. Still, the unease lodged in his chest didn't vanish with it. Back inside, the retriever had shifted positions and was watching the door. Mason pulled off his gloves. "You didn't come alone, did you?" he said softly. Down in Willow Glen, Lila Bennett stood by the telephone pole outside the town's only grocery store, holding a stack of pliers with both hands. Her jacket, pink with a faux fur hood, barely kept out the chill, but she didn't complain. Beside her was a woman with a kind face and broad shoulders, Pamela Rowe, the store clerk. Pamela was in her late 50s, short, with curly gray-streaked brown hair, and hands that looked like they had done years of work. She was the kind who knew everyone in town, and treated them all with a mix of nosiness and motherly kindness. "You sure you want to keep putting these up, sweetie?" Pamela asked gently, taking a flyer. "He's been missing for 4 days." Lila nodded, jaw set. "He's still out there." Pamela sighed, but didn't argue. She reached into her purse and handed Lila a roll of tape. "You're a strong one, like your mama." Angela was just pulling into the store's parking lot, her SUV crusted in ice. She stepped out tall and lean, with tired eyes and a no-nonsense gait. She wore her nurse's scrubs under a wool coat, and her blonde hair was tied back in a loose braid. The snow crunched under her boots as she approached. "Hey," she said, wrapping an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "We'll try the diner next, all right?" Lila nodded. Her small fingers clutched the tape like it was a lifeline. Angela gave Pamela a look. "Thanks for being kind." Pamela smiled. "Of course. But you might want to talk to Sheriff Lowell." Angela raised a brow. "Why? Because this isn't the first dog that's gone missing around here." Angela's expression hardened. They drove to the next spot, a bulletin board outside the Willow Glen Diner. As Lila taped up another poster, Angela stepped aside to make a call. Sheriff Mark Lowell was a man in his early 60s, built like an oak tree, with a weathered face and sharp eyes. He picked up on the second ring. "Angela," he said. "I heard about Sonny. I'm sorry, I need to know something." She said, her voice low. "Pamela said this isn't the first time." There was a pause. "It's not. 3 other dogs in the last month, all purebreds. I don't have proof, but I think someone's taking them, selling them maybe." Angela's stomach dropped. Back in the cabin, Mason stood at the window watching the woods. The dog was resting again, but something about the human footprints haunted him. He grabbed a pair of binoculars from the shelf. Through them, he scanned the forest edge, looking for any movement. Nothing. But that didn't mean no one was there. He turned back toward the fire. The dog had his head up again. This time he gave a soft, low whine, almost a question. "All right," Mason murmured. "Looks like neither of us is going anywhere for a while." The wind howled low and steady that night, threading through the pines outside Mason Clark's cabin like a distant warning. The fire inside had died down to glowing coals, casting a soft orange hue across the wooden floor. Mason sat in his chair near the hearth, eyes half closed, with Sonny now, visibly stronger, sleeping soundly at his feet. Then a sound cut through the silence. A scratching. Soft but real. Not the wind. It was at the door. Mason sat upright, heart suddenly awake. Sonny stirred ears perking. Then came the whimper. Faint. Fragile. He stood, quickly stepped to the door and opened it. Snow swirled under the porch light, and there, half buried in powder, was another golden retriever. Smaller, shivering violently, fur matted and crusted with frost. The young dog's legs buckled as he tried to move forward, then collapsed. Sonny stepped forward instinctively, barking once a short, urgent cry. The pup lifted its head weakly and whimpered in return. They knew each other. Mason knelt, gathered the small body into his arms. It was alarmingly light and brought him inside, setting him down on a thick blanket. Sonny lay beside him immediately, nose against the pup's face tail, brushing gently, as if to say, "You're safe." Mason wrapped another blanket around the newcomer and lit the fire higher. As he worked, unease crept into his gut. This wasn't random. One dog alone might have been a lost pet. But two on separate nights, both golden retrievers, both in critical condition and now clearly bonded. Someone had placed them here. On purpose. The next morning, just after sunrise, Mason walked into the forest behind the cabin. Snow crunched beneath his boots, brittle with overnight frost. He searched slowly, scanning the tree line until he saw them paw prints, small and large, but beside them deeper impressions, boot prints. Not old. He followed them. The tracks led east, cutting through a thicket of pine and cedar winding uphill. After nearly 30 minutes of walking, the trees thinned. And there it was. A small, decaying shack. Its roof sagged under snow. One shutter missing the door, crooked and half open. Mason stepped closer, heart thudding, and pushed inside. The smell hit first damp wood rust and something faintly sour. The interior was dim, but he could make out 4 large cages, old and rusted. On the floor were lengths of rope, snapped and chewed. In one corner, a metal food bowl was overturned, and on a dusty table nearby, an old, cracked leather notebook. He opened it. Inside were pages filled with notes, dates, breeds, weights, sales notations. Golden Retriever, male, 5 wires, strong build, high resale potential. Golden Retriever, male, 1 wire, timid, best sold as companion, pair recommended. Mason stepped back, stomach tight. This was no accident. Someone had brought these dogs here, raised them, sold them, and for some reason discarded these 2. In town at Hartley's grocery, the smell of ground coffee and cold tile filled the aisles. Lila Bennett held tightly to her mother's hand, her boots squeaking softly as they passed the shelves. They were only here to pick up milk and batteries, but fate had other plans. As they turned down the canned goods aisle, 2 men stood near the freezer in hushed tones. The first man was stocky, wearing a gray vest over a stained flannel shirt beard, unkempt. The second was taller, thinner, with a baseball cap pulled low. "Boss said, don't leave anything at the ridge anymore," the tall man muttered. "Too close to town. That guy up near the cabin might have seen something." Lila's eyes widened. Her grip on Angela's hand tightened. "Which cabin?" the stocky one asked. "Don't know. Somewhere off Pine Hollow. Right near where we dumped the 2 Goldens." Angela froze. Lila whispered, "Mom, did you hear that?" Angela nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing. She didn't say a word, but she didn't forget either. The morning was bone cold, the kind of chill that slipped beneath coats and clung to skin like frost. Mason Clark stood at the edge of the woods, camera bag strapped over one shoulder, a quiet resolve hardening in his chest. The previous night's encounter with the younger retriever, now sleeping curled beside Sonny, had shifted something in him. These dogs weren't just survivors. They were evidence, and someone had gone to great lengths to hide them. Today, he wasn't just retracing steps. He was collecting proof. Snow crunched under his boots as he followed the trail east through the forest, the trees growing denser and darker. The air smelled of pine and frozen earth. After 20 minutes of steady walking, he reached the clearing. The old shack crouched beneath the snow like a wound in the landscape, weather-beaten, quiet, and full of dark memory. Mason moved slowly, entering with care. He took photos every angle of the cages, the rusted chains, the snapped ropes. He zoomed in on scratches in the wooden floor, dog hair stuck in the wire mesh, and the logbook with its list of animals and prices. It all pointed to one thing: these dogs were trafficked. He stepped back to get a wide shot when he heard it. A footfall behind him. He spun. At the doorway stood a man tall, lean, his face sharp with windburn and suspicion. He wore a canvas hunting jacket patched at the elbows and a black beanie pulled low over graying hair. His boots were heavy and mud-crusted. There was something about his presence that didn't shout, only threatened with silence. Looking for something, the man asked. His voice was gravelly casual but edged with warning. Mason held the camera up. "You own this place." The man didn't answer. His eyes narrowed at the camera. "Delete that, not a chance." The man took a step forward. "You've got no idea what you're getting into. Dogs are being bred and dumped to die in a snowstorm." Mason said, his tone hardening. "I think I've got a pretty good idea." Before either could move, a low growl rumbled from behind. Sonny stood in the threshold, shoulders braced, ears, high tail, rigid. The younger retriever, still thin, still scared, stood behind him. But it was Sonny who moved first. The man froze, eyes flicking down. Sonny stepped forward with another guttural growl. He positioned himself between Mason and the stranger body, low, protective. The man hesitated. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in his expression. "I'm calling the sheriff," Mason said. "You've got about 10 seconds before your face is all over the internet." The man scowled, turned sharply, and bolted out the side door. Sonny barked once and lunged, but stopped at the doorframe. He watched until the figure disappeared into the trees, then turned back to Mason, tail still stiff. Mason breathed out. "You just saved my life, didn't you?" He knelt and wrapped his arms around Sonny's neck. "Good boy." That afternoon, Mason sat at his kitchen table, the laptop open and glowing. He uploaded the photos to his old Facebook account, the one he hadn't touched since before June's accident, and typed a caption. "This is what I found in the woods near Willow Glen. If you recognize this man or know anything about this operation, contact the authorities. These dogs deserve better. One of them saved me today." He hit post. In the town's quiet living room, Angela Bennett sat curled on the couch, flipping through her phone with tired fingers. Her long shift at the clinic had ended hours ago, but sleep hadn't come. Her daughter Lila had fallen asleep on the floor in front of the TV, still clutching a drawing of Sonny. Angela didn't expect anything to come of her nightly scroll through missing pet posts until she saw it. A photograph. A golden retriever standing protectively in a snowy shack doorway. The scar, the chest fur. Her breath caught. She sat upright, blinking. She zoomed in. It was him, Sonny. Angela fumbled for her phone and dialed the number listed in the post. It rang twice. "Hello." The voice was gruff but calm. Mason Clark. "Yes, this is Angela Bennett. You posted a photo of a retriever. His name is Sonny. He's my daughter's dog. He's been missing for over a week. Does he have a small scar over his left eye?" Mason looked at Sonny, who now lay peacefully near the fire. He moved closer and examined him. The scar was there. "He does." Angela's voice broke. I can't believe it. We thought he was gone." "He's not gone," Mason said quietly. "He's right here. And he's been through something awful. But he's healing." "We're coming to you," Angela said. "Please don't let him go. I wouldn't dream of it." Angela hung up her eyes full of tears. She knelt beside Lila, brushed the girl's hair back from her face. "Wake up, sweetheart." Lila stirred. "Mom," Angela smiled. "We found him." The sky above Willow Glen was the clearest it had been in weeks. The snow had finally stopped falling, and the light that filtered through the pine trees came gentle and golden, hinting at the promise of spring. Mason Clark stood on his front porch, the cold air biting at his face, but he didn't move. Not yet. He was waiting. Inside the cabin, Sonny lay by the firehead, resting on his front paws. Jasper was curled beside him, tail flicking every now and then in sleep. They looked like mirror images of each other, golden fur warmed by the dancing glow of flames. But it was Sonny who watched the door ears alert, as if he knew what was coming. Mason's phone buzzed in his pocket. Angela Bennett had texted, "We're 5 minutes away." He took a slow breath and glanced back inside. "You ready, boy?" Sonny didn't move, but his eyes said yes. The crunch of tires on snow came a few minutes later, slow and cautious. The SUV pulled up just outside the cabin's clearing, steam rising from its hood. The driver's door opened first, and Angela stepped out, tall, composed, dressed in a navy peacoat and jeans, her blonde braid peeking from under a knit cap. She moved like someone used to being in control, but her eyes were nervous, glassy. The passenger door slammed, and a small figure tumbled out. Lila Bennett was all motion boots, 2 big red cheeks, her arms flailing slightly as she raced toward the cabin. Her coat was unzipped, a cartoon dog print peeking from the shirt beneath. She was 10 years old, freckles scattered across her face like snowflakes, and her eyes were lit with a desperate hope that made Mason's throat tighten. "Sonny," she cried, voice splitting the stillness. Inside the cabin, Sonny stood. He didn't bark. He didn't pause. He ran. He bounded through the open cabin door and flew down the wooden steps, snow scattering beneath his paws. Lila met him halfway, dropping to her knees in the snow with arms outstretched. The impact was soft and full of joy. Sonny pressed his body into her tail, thrashing like it had never stopped wagging, whining, low and rhythmic. Lila clung to him, her fingers fisting in his fur, whispering through tears, "You came back. I knew you would." Angela covered her mouth with both hands, the emotion cracking her composed exterior. Mason stood on the porch unmoving. In that moment, something inside him gave way. The silence he had lived with for years, cold, brittle silence, broke like ice under pressure. Sonny looked back at him, as if to say, "This is why." Angela approached slowly. "Thank you." She said, her voice quiet, reverent. "I didn't think we'd ever see him again." "He saved me," Mason replied. "He protected me." "More than once." Angela nodded, eyes drifting toward the door. And the little one, Mason, stepped aside. Inside, Jasper had crept forward, peering out with nervous eyes. His frame was still thin fur, patchy from malnutrition, but his tail gave a single, hopeful wag. Lila gasped. "Is that his brother, I think so," Mason said. "He showed up the next night, same path, same storm." Lila stood brushing snow from her knees. She walked toward Jasper, slowly crouching as she neared him. "Hi there," she whispered. "You okay?" Jasper crept closer, step by cautious step, until his nose brushed her outstretched fingers. "You're gonna be okay," she said, smiling. "I'll call you Buddy." Mason looked at Angela. "I was thinking, maybe I could keep him. If that's all right." Angela smiled. "I think it's perfect." Later that afternoon, after a warm meal and stories shared over hot cocoa, Angela contacted Sheriff Mark Lowell. She handed over all the photos Mason had taken along with the physical notebook. The sheriff, an older man with steel-gray eyes and a stern but fair demeanor, had known Angela for years and took the information seriously. Within 48 hours, the shack was raided. Several more dogs were found frightened but alive. The man Mason had encountered was arrested near the edge of state lines. His name was Earl Vance, a known figure in black market pet trafficking circles. Thanks to Mason's evidence and Angela's persistence, the case opened up a wider investigation across the county. But Mason wasn't thinking about that now. He was sitting on the porch again, sipping coffee, watching the two retrievers, Sunny and Buddy, tumble in the snow, their tails wagging like banners in the wind. Lila's laughter rang through the air light and infectious. She had stayed an extra night with her mother in the guest room. The cabin, once heavy with silence, now echoed with life. Angela sat beside Mason, a blanket across her lap. "You've built something peaceful here." Mason nodded. Didn't feel like peace until they showed up. Funny how healing never comes the way we expect. He looked at her and smiled. A real smile. The kind he hadn't worn in years. Winter was still here, but it felt softer now. And far across the treetops where the sky opened wide, the first birds of spring were beginning to return. Sometimes miracles don't come with thunder or light. Sometimes they arrive quietly on four paws in the middle of a snowstorm, carrying nothing but love and a silent plea for help. Sunny wasn't just a lost dog. He was a messenger of healing, a reminder that even when we are buried in grief or fear, God doesn't forget us. He sends grace in unexpected forms through loyal eyes, warm fur, and a tail that never stops hoping. In our busy lives, we often miss these quiet signs. But when we slow down, listen, and open our doors, not just our homes but our hearts, we make room for the extraordinary. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs a little hope today. Leave a comment if you believe in second chances. And if you believe that God still works through the smallest creatures, type Amen in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that prove kindness, faith, and love are still alive in this world. May God bless you and all the silent souls still waiting to be found.